Right. It's an important part of the Australian dream, isn't it? Owning your own home, doing up a bathroom, adding an extension, all of that once you get your feet inside the door. But it's the cost of renovations at the moment that are skyrocketing, and that's due to a surge in the price of building materials. According to the ABS, Bureau of Statistics, and master builders, the cost of reinforcing steel is up 43% over the last 12 months alone, while structural timber, if you can get your hands on it, well, that's up 39%. Tim Reardon is the Chief Economist of the Housing Industry Association. He joins me now from Canberra. It's one thing if you're talking over summer with anyone who's doing renos, the cost of materials, even getting the materials, is just such a nightmare at the moment. Why have they gone up so much?
Yeah, so there's two key reasons here, Peter. One is just the speed at which this boom occurred. So the industry prior to COVID was slowing down. The announcement of home builder and the market surged. But the second reason is also just the scale of this boom as well. So since the end of home builder, which is almost 12 months ago now, we've seen a secondary boom in terms of demand for new detached housing and also now for apartments. And that combination, to put it in perspective, it's 20 to 30% higher than we've ever seen before and double what we would typically see in a bad year. And then when you add to that the constraints on land, labour and materials, you've mentioned timber there, that's a particular constraint. All of those combinations of both the supply and the demand side factors have caused this situation where we're seeing all of those material costs increasing, land, labour and steel, timber framing and the likes. And we expect that that's probably going to run through most of the course of 2022. We're not going to see an easing in that. And that's because there is at least 12 months worth of work ahead for the building industry to complete. There's an enormous volume of homes that are currently under construction, which is a positive from a macroeconomic perspective. And certainly as the year progresses, we'd expect to see at least a return of skilled migration, which will take pressure off the labour side of things. I'm sure that Australia will be a very attractive destination for skilled builders across the world. We're also just starting to see an easing in some of the material constraints. So particularly most of the building materials, of course, are produced domestically. And in the case of timber, 80 to 95% of the timber used in housing is produced domestically. But we are, even in good years or even in bad years, reliant on just a small amount of imports. And this year, given the enormous increase in demand, that demand for imported timber has increased. And at the same time as we've seen a boom, we've also seen a boom in demand for housing globally, which means we're competing against the United States, Northern Europe for that timber as well. The US is looking around about 100% increase in the price of timber. And here, as you just mentioned, it's a little bit under 50% over the course of the past year.
All right, let me just jump in there if I can, because I want to take you back to something you said at the very start. Given we've had our borders closed for 2.5 years, so zero migration, we've got obviously returning Australians, you say that housing demand is up 30%. Now, you're looking at then the existing population driving that demand, not migration, which is around 230,000 every year in gross terms, net terms, sorry. What's driving that 30%? Is it young people and renters with super low interest rates that are trying to get in? What's driving it?
Certainly young persons and renters. That household formation factor is really exceptionally high at the moment. But the migration side of the equation, it takes 3 to 7 years for a change in migration to flow through to demand for housing. Of course, most new migrants would either live in an apartment or rent for a period of time. Most of them arriving as students as well, taking 3 to 7 years to complete and transition to a demand for a new house. So there's a lag factor there. That lag factor is going to kick in from early 2023, probably around about the same time that we see interest rates rising. Also a time at which that volume of homes that are under construction start to slow, house prices have slowed. And so from that 2023 timeframe onwards, we expect to begin that slow descent down. Now, we're not expecting this to be a deep down cycle in the 24-25 timeframe, but it certainly will slow from the levels we're seeing at the moment. But on that population factor, the other dynamic, we know that every time a city goes into lockdown, demand for housing takes off. We've seen that every time Victoria went into lockdown. Straight afterwards, they're out buying new homes, and that's why Victoria is building almost double the number of homes this year as what they do normally. And the same thing happened in Sydney when they came out of lockdown in September. So it's not just the lag factor, it is also that COVID has driven a decline in the average number of people per home. It's not just for detached homes, it's also for apartments. And anecdotally, you can imagine that people that were, say, renting out their spare bedroom are now using that as a work from home space. And as a consequence, we simply need more homes to meet the population that we had at the start of 2020.